Now that we are well into fall and winter is quickly approaching, the days are getting shorter and running in daylight is becoming harder. Oisel's premium reflective collection is designed with runner safety in mind. Both highly visible in the dark but subtle in the daytime, thanks to the tonal reflective print that only shines bright when reflecting the light. From tights, shorts, jackets, and tanks to accessories like hats and gloves, with Oisel's reflective collection, you can stay safe and stay seen. It is dark here in Cleveland where I've been running, so I just love Oisel's reflective collection. I'm a big fan of the firecracker tights. The bird pattern is so cute, and they look all over sparkly at night. To check out the firecracker tights and the rest of the reflective collection, go to oisel.com/collection/reflective, or even easier, click the banner link at the top of the Hear Her Sports website at hearhersports.com. You are listening to Hear Her Sports, a podcast for active, adventurous women who love hearing stories from other active, adventurous women. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in sports through a conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. Hello and welcome. This week I'm talking to Helena Gilbert-Snyder, a young athlete strongly interested in pushing for gender equity in sport. What interests me is that not only is Helena an athlete, but she works in the sports industry and works with high school athletes. So she is seeing what's happening in a bunch of different areas of sport. We talk about sexism, the impact of her work with high school cyclists, success, getting knocked off course, and her binder of stories. Whenever I get the opportunity to talk to younger athletes, it feels like a good check-in. Where we are now, what's important, what issues we still are fighting, where we have seen success, and what is the next generation interested in accomplishing. So a big thank you to Helena for taking the time to be here on the podcast, and let me introduce her. Helena Gilbert-Snyder is a financial analyst at Specialized Bicycles, and she races bikes at the professional level across dirt, road, and gravel disciplines. A big focus for Helena's racing this season is the Lifetime Grand Prix. She is the youngest of the athletes selected to compete in this new, exciting, televised 6-race off-road series. Helena is highly involved with several local high school mountain bike teams through NICA, the National Interscholastic Cycling Association, and with her local road racing organization. She is also an active advocate for women's sports and gender equity at a broader level. Well, welcome, Helena. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be on.
Great. So you are off to Redlands soon. That's going to be fun. Is that your first time?
Yes, it will be my first time, my first stage race, so nothing like getting into the thick of things with the first one you're going to do.
No kidding. That's a rough way to start, I think. So you said it's your first stage race, so how have you been preparing?
A lot of the training I do for the Lifetime series is just going to carry over to the stage racing. So because the races I do are so long, over 6 hours for many of them, I'm counting on that being able to get me through 5 days of road racing.
Well, just from my own experience, I always noticed that there was a sort of a break of 3 days. Like it was pretty easy to do 3 days. The 4th and 5th are pretty hard.
Well, I'll see how I feel on day 4 and 5.
So you mentioned the Lifetime Grand Prix. I've been following that, and it just sounds like, I don't know, super stupendous.
Yeah, it's new this year. It's kind of a cool idea from Lifetime to pull together some of the top men and women in predominantly North America to go to 6 events across most of the year and compete for a large prize purse, but more importantly, just increase field sizes and draw attention to racing at the professional level in the U.S.
Yeah, there's not that much big racing anymore in the U.S., or it seems like it's dropped off a little bit.
Yeah, unfortunately it has. We've seen some of the big road tours leave. Mountain biking has always kind of been there, but more in the background. And road at definitely an amateur level is struggling a bit. So hopefully this series can, at minimum, draw a lot of people into the sport in ways that weren't happening beforehand.
So what was the first event like? You've had one event, right?
Yes, there's been one. My race did not go well. There were some big issues early on that put me more into survival mode instead of good result mode, but it was pretty exciting because my coworker Mariah Wilson did win that event, which was very exciting for me to see. And we're looking forward to the next one, which is the Unbound 200 in June. So that'll be 200 miles in Kansas.
Wow. You've piqued my interest. What happened early on?
Um, there was a bit of a feed zone mishap, and I did not get a bottle on the first lap, which it was very hot out, so I got dehydrated very early on. Definitely had some heat exhaustion by the second lap, and was trying to get to the finish line without having to pull out. So, not the way you want to start things, but we all get to drop one result from the series. And, I just have to move on from that one and see what I can do the rest of the year.
Right. And not miss the next feed.
Yeah, yeah. That will not happen again for sure.
The races are longer. And since you mentioned nutrition, like how are you managing that? And, given that you had this little mishap, what's gonna change for this next one? And that's gonna be so much longer too.
Yeah. Thankfully, my stomach is bulletproof. I have not been able to make it upset with whatever I eat. So I rely very heavily on drink mix and gels for all of my racing. So for the long one, we're going to be on the bike for over 12 hours, well over 12 hours. It's definitely a lot of, drinking fluids consistently, getting in the calories consistently. And it's a matter of, how many calories can you consume and how many calories can your body handle before before everything breaks down.
And I am assuming that you have a crew, given that you had a feed for the first one.
Yes, yeah. So my crew is our volunteers and friends. They're not necessarily professionals, but they're awesome. So I think for Kansas, I've managed to convince my family to go. So they'll be helping out. There'll probably be some coworkers there from Specialized who will be happy to help. And that one's mostly self-supported. There's really only two feed zones where your crew can be. So you bring most of your hydration and food with you on the bike.
Whoa, that's a
Versus,
lot to
yeah,
carry.
yeah, there's camelbacks involved, and there's a lot of stuff that you have to bring with you, and like mechanical stuff for when you flat or have an issue. You're in the middle of nowhere, so you have to be able to deal with it yourself.
So what does your bike look like? What kind of bike, and what panniers or bags or whatever do you have?
Yeah, so I'm super lucky. I got a new Crux from Specialized, so I will be racing on that. It looks like a road bike. It just has beefier tires and other little geometry changes, but I'll be using that bike and I'll see how I want to set it up, but I'll likely be using bags on my top tube to carry supplies. I'm a big fan of just stuffing food into my pockets, so I'm sure I'll be doing that. And I'll also have a camelback, which will carry most of my fluid, two water bottles, and then at every crew stop, I'll swap out everything and get a new full load.
Are you super rigorous about how much you're eating, like calories or grams of carbohydrates or however you're calculating it?
Yeah, I have a coach who helps kind of calculate out how much I need to be eating and when. It's less about what you're eating in some ways and more that you are eating, especially for events like this where you just need to get stuff into your stomach. So I'll be counting on him to help me plan out, when I have to eat and what. And then it's just a matter of, looking at your clock and knowing, okay, 30 minutes has gone up, like I need another gel. And just staying on top of it. You can't get into a hole early, as as I know firsthand, and that's a lot of the success for these longer races.
Right. What else is your training like? Like, what kind of rides are you doing, and how often are you riding? I know that you have a full time job, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. But let's start with that.
Yeah, so I do a full-time job, so during the week I fit my rides around that. I'm able to be pretty flexible with my work, so I can go out for 2 hours around lunchtime and get in rides. You'll see most of my longer rides are on the weekends when I'm able to, put out 6 or 7 hours and not feel bad about missing work. So that's when I get in most of my volume. It depends. I try to aim for around 15 hours on the bike each week. It ebbs and flows depending on work and weather. And I also, wrap in strength training around that too. So there's a lot going on at, at all times of the day.
And what kind of cross training and strength training are you doing? And do you have a gym at Specialized?
There is a gym at Specialized.
Nice.
I work with a coach near me who, really specializes in strength and conditioning that can basically balance out what I do on the bike. So making sure that my core is really strong and the rotational forces that really impact you on the bike, I'm able to counter. And that comes into play, especially in the longer races when your body gets tired. You don't want to start compromising how you're moving, which can, impact efficiency and lead to injury if you're doing something wrong.
I recently heard a term that I really like called technical endurance, which basically is what you're talking about, being able to maintain good form, for a long time, even when you're tired.
Yeah, it's a skill and it's hard to practice, right? Because you don't you don't get into those issues until you're, been on the bike for over 6 hours, and most of us aren't on the bike for over 6 hours very frequently. So it can be tough to know how you'll react in those situations.
How are you with really long endurance? Because 12 hours is a long time to be on a bike.
Yeah, that so far my longest race has been 9 hours on the bike. And that one did go well. So I'm hopeful that I'll be okay for these long events. All of them are challenging in their own ways. But, I do have experience with some really long races, both mileage and time. So counting on that to get me through, and also the work I've been putting on the bike and off the bike, and eating, of course.
Yeah. And what kind of doubts do you have?
Um, I don't know about doubts. I think that there's always kind of the thought that, oh, what if I'm not good enough for this, or what if I don't deserve to be here, when you see people you're lining up against who, do this professionally or are world champions or national champions, whatever it may be. But I do this because I want to. It's not my full-time job. I could drop it tomorrow and no one would really would really, care in some ways. It's completely up to me, and it's really cool to be able to see how I can impact a lot of people around me just by what I'm doing on the bike, even though I'm not at, a world level. It can still really drive people and inspire people in other ways, which has been a really cool experience for me to see.
And what are you most excited about?
I like competition. I am extremely competitive, and I think it's super fun to do things where you're not sure how it's going to go or if you're going to finish, or what might happen on race day. So I'm always excited to do things that are slightly scary and you're not positive it's going to work out well.
So you said you like competition and you also sort of hinted that it's a little bit scary. So, on race day, like what's your mindset? Like how do you approach being there on the starting line with doubts and excitement and nerves and also goals, I suppose?
I think it's changed for me over the years. Early on when I was racing, I was definitely focused on the result, and I was, super focused and zoned in all the time. And that's still the case, but I think I've realized that, it's okay to have some humor with the whole situation and laugh a bit. So, now when I go into races, I don't overthink my warm up. I don't stress about, the perfect everything leading up to it. I do definitely get very focused. You can ask my my parents how focused I can get. Don't try to have a conversation with me necessarily, but I do try to make crack some jokes to myself, or just kind of look at things in the bigger picture, because I think that it's super easy to get so focused on a certain race or a certain result and forget that there are 50 of us lined up in more or less underwear on a start line at 6 a.m. in the middle of nowhere in the dark. Like, that's kind of ridiculous. And the
And
fact
you
that we
paid
do
for it.
this, yeah, we pay for this and it just hurts for 6 hours. Like,
Right.
who does that, right? So I try to think of it that way. And, because things happen like that last race where it just goes south immediately, right? And like, if I had gone there and been like, oh my God, like my entire life rests on this moment, it would have been really crippling to have that result, right? But, I did sulk for an hour, I would say, but I did, just kind of recognize that it happens and you just got to move on. And there's a lot of positives to take away from it. And people still, enjoyed talking to me and helping me. And that's all right. So I try to keep it light. I try to think positive and still go out and, we all rip each other's legs off for 6 hours. So there's that too.
And it's always a learning lesson. Like,
Yeah.
don't miss your feet. Now you know. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So what are your long-term goals? I mean, not just for the Grand Prix, but other races or maybe the Grand Prix series.
That's a tough one. The Grand Prix series, I want to, finish it feeling proud of my results, feeling like I've done what I could for this year. I want to finish it, still feeling like I want to ride my bike, hopefully competitively. And I have realized that what makes it worthwhile for me on the bike is how I can impact others, both, people who just support me, on race day or, the kids that I work with. A lot of how I see success in what I do on the bike is how I can cause other people to feel successful themselves. So I definitely want to come out of this series with both the personal accomplishment of completing it, and hopefully, doing something impressive that I'm proud of, and also, coming out of it and being able to see the impact that I could have on, others that I know who, join me on the journey for the 8 months of the series that was going on, and, might join the series in the future. That would be really cool.
You've mentioned impacting other people twice. So, what is it about what you're doing do you think inspires other people or, as you said, impacts them?
I've spent a lot of time with high school NICA teams, so that's the high school mountain bike leagues, and that's where I started cycling my senior year. And what really struck me from the beginning was how valuable it is when people give you their time. Money is one thing, product is another thing. That's great, but something that has the most impact is when people give up their time, because that's really the most valuable thing. And that stuck with me early on, and that's what I try to do now. I want to give, my time to, these 15-year-olds who are on bikes or, whatever they're doing in their life. I know the impact it can have on, someone's future, whether they stay in biking or not. And that's something I want to really spread awareness for, because I think people don't realize how impactful that can really be. And so that's what I try to do. I really do try to spend my time with others in ways that it's worthwhile for more than just myself.
Talk more about what you're doing with the high school students.
I've been involved with, the high school leagues in my area. So El Cerrito High School is the main one. That's where I rode. I've done a little bit with some Berkeley high school riders, a little bit with some Albany high school riders. And it does depend on my work schedule and, if I'm in the area, but I'll go out on rides with the team for training rides as a coach. I'll take groups out and we'll go do a workout for their practice. I'll also go out with a couple riders, on the weekend or after school, and we'll just talk or practice something that they want to practice. I've gone to some practice races with kids. So, we'll go to a local cross country race and, they'll do the race. We'll talk about how it went, kind of get them ready for their own league races. I also have been super lucky to help out with some like girls recruiting. So we do little programming things like decorating helmets, or hanging out in a backyard and just chatting, and that's been really cool to try to grow the presence of girls in the sport, because that's always been an issue in cycling. And starting it from the very kind of entry into the sport in high school is where I hope to see a lot of the changes happening. So I try to do what I can there to increase the numbers.
Why are the numbers so low?
I think there's a lot of possible reasons, and I don't think anyone has the perfect answer. I think one reason is that cycling is historically a very male-dominated sport, so you have that barrier already. I think there's also the barrier of getting girls into athletics. It can be daunting to try to convince, a girl to join a sport that is male dominated, that is competitive, that can be, painful or hard. They're not always sure that they want to do that themselves. And I think those are two of the main reasons, is, making it something that is accepted, that, yeah, like, you belong here as a girl in this sport. And right now, it doesn't always seem that way.
It's so interesting, though, because cycling actually has a really long history with women. When women finding freedom on bikes. I mean, maybe not necessarily racing, but certainly taking part in riding.
Yeah, yeah. There have been women. There have been women in history, believe it or not, even though no one talks about them. Crazy how that works, right?
Right.
So yes, it's frustrating because there is a history of women in cycling, but no one knows about it. No one talks about it. Well, some people talk about it, and people don't know what they're talking about, as we can tell. And it's so much about just changing that perspective that, this is not a crazy idea that women belong in cycling. It's happened for a long time, and it's going to happen in the future. And it's just not in people's awareness right now. And just trying to change that, every day is something I hope to do. And I think there is progress, but it's just super hard when people don't think that, right? They don't think that cycling is for them because they're a woman.
Do you see a difference in mountain biking versus road riding, or mountain biking and gravel riding and cyclocross maybe versus road riding?
Um, I do see differences. My experience with mountain biking is, domestic at kind of the high school, and then like pro level domestically. And my road experience is pretty much local right now. It's not super high level. I do see a lot more presence of youth in mountain biking, both girls and boys, especially girls. I see hardly any youth girls in road racing in my area. I think that's possibly due to the NICA leagues. NICA has really brought mountain biking into a sport that middle and high school kids can do, and it's normal for them to do. And road racing does seem more elitist. It does seem more out there, more dangerous. It's harder to just get into recreationally for youth specifically. So I do see mountain biking making strides to kind of increase participation among girls and boys in the US, and I think road is struggling to do the same that mountain biking is doing.
You talked a little bit about girls, not thinking maybe that they could do an activity or do sports or something. Did I mishear you?
Um, I kind of covered that. So I think that there's this kind of expectation that, for girls that, you don't have to be competitive. Like, it's all right to be kind of passive with things that, failure's not good. Like, don't push yourself to something you might not be able to do.
Mm.
I think there's that pressure of perfection, and not necessarily perfection of, you have to be perfect in everything you do, but perfection as like, don't do something that you don't know you can complete, right? So getting into competitive sport, something like mountain biking, failure is is going to happen. It's reality in that sport, and to be successful, even just once, takes a lot of struggling. It takes pushing yourself physically and mentally. And I think that many girls don't realize that it's okay to do that, that it's okay to really push yourself out of a comfort zone and everything that comes with that, right? Like, can you be confident and demanding and take up space and be loud and, be aggressive? All of these things that I think our society subconsciously or even consciously tells young girls that they shouldn't do is what many of them need to be successful, both in life and cycling. You need all those qualities to deal with the challenges that you'll face in all kinds of disciplines of biking. And all of this all of this is a challenge, right? All of this is tough to talk about and teach and kind of wrap your head around. And I still struggle to kind of figure out, how I want to talk about this and approach it. I don't think there's a perfect answer there, but I do think that when you look at most girls and most boys, you see that, the boys are more willing to try things that they're probably not going to complete the first time, or they're more willing to demand something that they think they should have, and girls are more likely to stand off to the side and just be happy with kind of the scraps, or be happy with, something, achieving something that they knew they could do in the first place. And I think that's kind of a failure on society's part, not to, allow for girls to push themselves in ways that they should be allowed to do.
You made me think that, like success in sports and in other areas too is not necessarily about winning all the time.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, of course, winning is maybe the most obvious success metric, right? But I think success is so much more than that. It's again hard to recognize and talk about, I think, but success can be so personal. It's, did you as a person do something, to your best ability at the moment? Like, did you overcome something that you weren't able to do in the past? How did you improve the experience of those around you? All of this is our types of success. And, in order to win races, oftentimes all of that is part of it. But, there can be people who win races who are terrible people to hang out with, or, don't improve the lives of others, who might not, treat their body well. All of those things are different measures of success. And I think that, stressing that success can look different for different people is also important to increase girls' participation, because when you focus only on the result, you often neglect the mental side of things or the progression side of things, right? Like, if you're going to be in a sport for 20 years, like, you're not going to be number one for 20 years, right? So how else can you make that successful and worthwhile for you? Because I do want cycling to be a lifetime, you know, whether it's lifetime hobby or lifetime, serious hobby for everyone. You have to find ways to keep challenging yourself and seeing success in ways that other people might not understand.
Well, even when you're racing, or you're in that racing mode, you're not racing every day. You're training every day probably.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you have to define success, on a daily basis as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is making me think about something that I read on your website where you said that you were not good at mountain biking skills. And this is something I think about a lot, is like how people get better at something that they're not good at. And like, why the hell do we stick with this stuff that we're not good at? From the outside, it probably looks crazy. And, this goes into what you're talking about with girls feeling like they have to be good right when they start, which is, of course, not the reality of things.
Yeah, I was terrible at mountain biking, and I am still not spectacular at it. And
I love that. I love that.
honestly, I, oh man, I don't know why I was so stubborn about it, but like I was just god awful at mountain biking. Like I could go up hills, fine. I could not go down hills to save my life. And it was more of just like me getting really determined that like I could do this, right? I was like, I know I can do this. I'm going to do this at some point, right? And like it took years really until I would say, adequate at mountain biking, and a lot of practice and a lot of frustration and a lot of working with a coach. And I think people like really want to like see me now and be like, oh, like you're so good at everything. And all I see are things I need to improve on, right? Like I'm like, oh man, like I don't know what you're seeing right now, but I see an endless list of things I need to practice and, improve myself. And, there's just that little bit of like annoying like frustration with yourself and like desire to prove that you can do something, I think is what really drove me to pick up mountain biking at relatively like late age to some of these high school kids. I was 18 and had zero experience mountain biking, and stick with it. And even now, I still get frustrated with certain things I feel like I should be able to do, but it's just showing up every day and kind of thinking to yourself, okay, this is a decade long process, maybe multiple decades, a lifetime
Right? Yeah,
process of getting
sure.
good at mountain biking, and being okay with that and just going out every day to get better and find success, right? Like success can be for some people like going over a curb, and that's totally fine. I have been there, right? Like I remember figuring out how to, get my front wheel over an obstacle, and it was mind blowing. And it was the biggest success of probably like the month for me. And some people would have looked at that and been like, what the hell? Like that is nothing, but like for me it was huge, right? So there are different levels of success and different things that drive people to find that success, and it's all about encouraging that, right? And like stop discouraging people from doing things that are challenging or hard, because it is worthwhile.
You mentioned starting late. What was the draw? Like, I mean, it sounds like you signed up for mountain biking in your high school and you never turned back.
Yeah, I had done competitive soccer for most of my life, but I had seen a couple of my teammates tear their ACLs like on the field in front of me, and I realized, you know what, like I don't want to do this in college. I don't want to destroy my ACLs at age 18. Maybe I should do something else. And I just happened to know one person on the mountain bike team, and I said, "Hey, like, can I join?" And that was it. Like there was really no reason besides I need a new sport to do. And that got me into it, and because I am stupidly competitive and really stubborn and annoying, I stuck with it even though it was frustrating, and that's how it started.
Cool. We talked a little bit about that there aren't as many girls in cycling. What do we do about that? And, on the podcast, I often talk about the tangled web of how, fixing one thing seems like the perfect answer, but then it has all these cascading effects. And I expect that your answer is going to be like that.
Yes, there are so many. Oh man, I wish I had like a one sentence answer for you here, but I do not. There are levels of it, right? I think that a lot of it is making it acceptable, like just normal, right? Like make cycling a normal activity that women can do, girls and women can do. That's kind of the first step. But of course, it's so much deeper than that, right? So we know, right, that women are very active in trying to get more women into sports, just let's say specific to cycling. Most of the women I know in the sport are advocates and are very active and, are willing to put in effort. And I do believe that, women have a huge role in, increasing accessibility and numbers of other women. But I think we're at the point now where it's on the men to step in. I think that men do not realize or do not care about how much of an impact they can have on cycling for women. It's so frequently kind of shrugged off as, oh, like, women can increase women because like women can talk to women, or all of that. But I wish I had the power that, a man did when they say something. If I say one thing and a man says the exact same thing, what that man says will often go so much further than what I say. And that's a huge power right there that men don't realize they can have to, increase accessibility and, kind of the atmosphere that cycling has for women. And then, the other aspect is because cycling is male dominated right now, let's say in the US, all of those men have this amazing opportunity to open the door and give space to women. It is so easy for, men to go up to women at races and just say, hey, like, what's your name? Like, how is your race? Talk to them about their racing, talk to them about what they want to do, or whatever it is, right? Like, make women feel seen, make them feel like they have a space. It does not have to be, huge time commitments, although if you want to, like, feel free, that's totally acceptable. All of these little things that men can do to have huge impacts. I think that, if you had 10 men talk to 10 women and ask them to come to a race, that would be huge. I think that if a woman felt like she had support and mentorship from just a friend, in cycling who happens to be a guy who could, walk her through a race and like, support her at the end and kind of talk through how to be successful and whatever it was, that can do so much for the sport. It can do so much for the visibility of women and the kind of acceptance that women are a part of this. They deserve to be seen, they deserve to be here, and they deserve to have, everything that men have in the sport.
Everything that you've mentioned so far is pretty grassroots. What do you think about sort of the structural system? Is it supportive? I mean, we could talk about a lot of different structures like UCI, USA Cycling, but any other like clubs and whatnot.
I have not had great experience with USA Cycling. I think that the organization means well. I do think that they want to improve cycling, but I think that they're going about it the wrong ways, or not. They're not aware of, how to get women into the sport. I I had an issue with an official at a national championship a couple years ago where he straight up said that the men's races were the main event of the national championship, in front of professional female cyclists. And I was shocked, right? I was like, if this is the belief that, the top officials of USA Cycling have, that's a problem. There are also, as most people in road racing know, the upgrade requirements for road racing are very, very difficult for women because they rely on field sizes. And many field sizes for women are super small. And if you don't even have 5 starters, points don't even count, right? And so many times at local races, there will not be 5 women in a field. So, there's no way for women to move up categories the way the current system is set up. So USA Cycling is really driving women away from road racing, into gravel, into mountain biking, because of how bureaucratic their system is. They don't allow for people who come from, gravel racing or mountain biking to upgrade road categories based on recommendations or other events, which I think is a huge oversight, and they're losing out a lot of participation due to that. And, so far they have not really been receptive to changing that. And I think it's unfortunate. We do know that most of their membership base are older men, but if they want to change that, they have to, address the problems that are facing their other groups. So, yeah, I would say that most of my my belief in change comes from, grassroots and smaller organizations like NICA, because I don't see USA Cycling or the UCI making changes at the bigger level. Even though they have the power to do so, I don't think that they are in the spot to make those changes. So I think it's on other people to do it for them.
In your experience with the high school kids, what are their goals for cycling? Do they want to continue racing once they go to college? Like, how is sport, how are bikes fitting into their life?
It depends on the kid. A lot of them come into the sport not thinking they want to race, forever, because it's just a high school sport they're going to do. And you'll see some completely change over the years, right, across the 4 years in high school, to be super competitive, to want to do it, professionally later on, whether they have a job or not. They still want to compete at the pro level. Others, just want to do it recreationally for the rest of their lives, and that's totally fine. I do think that most of them aren't necessarily interested in racing professionally later on, and that's part of the reason why I think there are so many lessons that cycling can give to youth that is beyond just, winning a race, that I kind of that I want to drill into them before they graduate high school, because I think that there are lessons to learn and take away from that will, positively impact the rest of their lives, whether it's on a bike or not.
In some ways, what we're talking about makes me a little sad, just because, it seems like these are some of the issues that women, girls faced when I was young, or even, earlier than that. Like, why aren't we getting rid of these issues?
Yeah. None of this is new. And I know so many older women who, are in the road racing with me, who, are 40 or 50 and have faced the same problems their whole lives. And I think looking at it as, this is probably going to be something that's talked about well after, I'm dead. Like, this is going to go on for years, right?
Don't make me cry.
But there are changes that can be made. We see it. We see more women getting into the sport. We see women who are willing to say, hey, that's not right. We're seeing men say that, hey, that's not right. Women deserve this. So I do see a lot more willingness to talk about these situations. I see a lot more willingness to, put a foot down and say, hey, like, that's sexist. Like, that needs to stop, or this needs to change. Like, I'm not willing to settle for something that is still degrading me. And I think that has improved, from before I was born until now. I just think that, as more women get into the sport, more issues come to the surface that, are so systemic and, need to be addressed. And it's just going to be a process, and being willing to, figure out what you want to focus on, and, try to find support, and, just keep talking about it, and just keep bringing it to light. And, don't let people convince you that you're not worth it.
Well, I want to talk about your job, because you work at Specialized. So what exactly do you do there?
I work specific to the USA, so I'm not a global employee. And I do a lot of work on our bike and equipment product. So I kind of help look at, all of our prices and margins for the year, and figure out how to sell our product, and kind of the landscape of the US, and, how we can, increase sales, and, support the riders that we service. So that is a very broad answer and does not really answer anything, I don't think. But whatever pops up on the day that someone needs help with, I'm there to support them.
Right. Well, I can ask you, do you think about gender in that role? I mean, you talked about, thinking about your customer and selling to your customer. I mean, how do you deal with cycling for genders?
That's an interesting question. Our product teams have realized that, say a male and female body are more similar than one might think, and it's more, you know, people's shape that changes. So, we have different types of saddles that, will fit both men and women, but, are wider or narrower or whatever it may be. Same with bikes, same with suspension. But I do think that thinking about who are you trying to sell to and like what do they want out of a product or what are they looking for in a piece of equipment? Because I think there has historically been a focus on, okay, like the cyclist is a 30-year-old man. And, now we know that's not the case. Our customers are, 5 years old to 95 years old, all genders, across the US, all kinds of disciplines. And I think it's a lot harder to internalize that than to just say it, right? Like I think that, it's still super easy to list off, 5 professional cyclists and just have them all be men at the company, but thinking, oh, like, SD Works is like the top, if not one of the top road teams in Europe. They're all women. How can we design our product to help them be successful? And, of course, at the amateur level too, in the US, how can we design, bikes that will help a woman feel more comfortable on, rough gravel roads. She might need different suspension than a man because she weighs less. Things like that, I think, are definitely recognized by our product teams and are being talked about and thought through. And I think it can just be a challenge to realize how many different types of riders we have and how best to service all of them and make all of them feel valued and, feel like, yeah, like you are a cyclist. Like whether you ride once a year or 6 days a week, you are a cyclist and you have a spot. And that's really what we're trying to do right now to make everyone feel welcome.
You must be unusual at Specialized being, I'm sort of imagining you being one of the few women there. Is that true?
There are more women that specialize than there have been. I still think like the company splits maybe like 70-30. So it is not equal. However, it is improving. I would say that I'm probably one of the loudest and most annoying about these topics there. So there's that. But I've been there for over 2 years now. So, I've kind of seen the company and kind of what we do, and I'm still around, so that's good.
There's that. How did you know you wanted to get into the cycling industry? I mean, speaking of role models, as I said, there probably weren't a ton of them.
Yeah, so I knew that, I never wanted to just be a professional athlete. Not that I could have anyway, but, I always wanted to, have a job, something in probably like finance and data, because that's what I really enjoyed doing. And, I had an opportunity to go work for Specialized as a full-time intern. And, I thought to myself, hey, like this is, a company that aligns with what I'm interested in athletically right now and gives me an opportunity to work in a job that's, challenging mentally, right? Like it's, data driven. And working out problems. So it really did seem perfect. Having support on the bike side and having support on the job side, it was just kind of a perfect match. And I'm still there, obviously, so it has worked out so far. And I do still feel that way. It's great to be able to combine kind of my passions outside of work with my work. And it also is nice because it does not feel like bikes 24/7, right? Because I'm not working on product. So I can kind of, get into my worksheets and my databases and forget that it's about bikes. So I can kind of, escape from bikes a little bit if I need to. and still enjoy the industry experience.
In the YouTube video that you're on, it was a Get Kids on Bikes benefit, and you say that you made sort of this reference of pages of stories of sexism. Was that at work? Was that in your coaching? What are you
No,
talking about?
yeah. So over, when was this? I think I had just graduated high school. I was in college at this point, and I was frustrated because people that I talked to didn't realize how widespread, the experiences that women have are, right? They was like, oh, like sexism is old, right? Like we're in 2020, like sexism doesn't exist anymore. Like, come on. And it was frustrating to me because there's so many levels of sexism and it's everywhere, right? Like if you're not seeing sexism, you're just not aware of it. Like it's there, like your eyes just aren't used to seeing it. You're so used to it. And so what I did was I went and just reached out to dozens of cyclists I knew. At that point they were all about my age, so maybe 18 or so, 18 years old. And I said, "Hey, like what's your experience as a cyclist? Like do you have experiences, negative or positive, related to your gender, whatever it was?" And I got so many responses from all kinds of people, different ages, different experiences. And some of them were shocking, right? Like, you don't want to hear a 16-year-old like just list off these experiences of, you know, being made to feel like she shouldn't ride a bike because she's female. And I think people like to have this nice little bubble, right? That like, oh yeah, like, that doesn't happen here, right? But it does. It happens here, it happens everywhere. I think that most women have these experiences. I think it would be harder to find a woman who doesn't than a woman who does. And I just collected them. I didn't really do anything with them. Like I didn't want to like publish them, but I just wanted to have them to learn from myself and also just know that yes, like, you're not alone. Like there are other people who've experienced this and there are people who want to change it. And that was a big moment for me too. But I was like, you know what? Like I'm stubborn enough and like I'm willing to say things that other people might be too shy to say or, stand up for people who don't feel comfortable doing that. And that was probably one of the catalysts that really got me to all of this, advocacy and talking about everything because, it's everywhere. Like there are so many people who experience all kinds of things that just need, acknowledgement and need people to be willing to make changes for them.
You mentioned earlier about having men be more advocates for women, and that was one of my big revelations during the Me Too movement because I can't remember why it came up, but we discovered that my husband had no understanding that basically every time I went out on a bike ride, I would get catcalled or harassed or this or that. And it was just like this thing that happened every day. And he had never realized it was that bad. And part of me was like, oh my gosh, how could you have not realized that? But the other part of me was like, how could I not have told him that before now?
Yeah. Yeah, that is that is such a common experience that I've heard about. And I think a lot of it is, I don't go around telling my male friends the experiences that I've had, right? It's like, that's kind of a weird conversation starter, to be fair.
Right.
It's like, oh, hey, like, do you want to hear about what happened to me this weekend? No, it's kind of weird. But then I'm also like, hey, you know what? I should tell you what happened to me this weekend, right? Like, you should absolutely hear about this. So maybe that will be my conversation starter now. Um, I think it's like, okay, guys, like, men, why don't you talk to your female friends and ask them about this, right? Because, like, I think that women would be super happy to express kind of their thoughts and their experiences, which are so unique to themselves, right? Like, the experiences I have will not be the same that someone else has, even if they're similar. Everyone kind of has their own reactions to things. And I think it's just hard to first tell women that it's okay to tell men about these things, and then men that it's okay to ask women about these things if you're well meaning about it. And I think that, the Me Too movement shocked so many men that they're like, oh my God, like this happens. And for all the women, it was like, yeah, like this is like old news. Like, where were you the past 50 years? This is not shocking to any of us. So there's this huge disconnect between genders about daily life, really. And kind of overcoming that divide is super hard, and it can be super uncomfortable for everyone, right? So that's why people avoid it. But I think that trying to find that, discomfort and accept it and try to, figure out how it can be approached, and how both sides, both men and women, can use their experiences and their different types of power dynamics to make everyone's lives better. And that's super challenging, right? No one wants to talk about these things because they are super uncomfortable and super not fun and not a fun conversation topic, but it's so important to talk about them.
It's also sort of like taking the red pill, blue pill thing. Like once you see it, then, oh my goodness, it's everywhere.
Yeah, that's part of it too. Like once you are aware of it, you can't ignore it anymore, right? Like you suddenly have this obligation to say something or do something. And I think that's daunting also. I know I had a former manager who I love so dearly. And, we would talk about these things, and, he started to realize them, at work or in daily life. And he came up to me and was like, hey, like, I see these things now. I have to say something. I was like, yes, you do. You can't just be a bystander now. And I think that it was super daunting for him, but also he leaned into it and he was like, you know what? I can. I'm, older. Like I can totally say something now. And it was very encouraging to see that, because I think that you do feel like you have power when you recognize sexism or whatever it is in the world. You recognize it and then are able to at least challenge it or say something about it. And so I think that people should strive to be that way instead of just pretending it doesn't exist or refusing to see it, right?
What's it like in the cycling industry? I mean, I don't want to call out Specialized, but at Specialized or in the industry as a whole.
I think that at Specialized and in the industry, most people are very well-meaning. They want to make a difference. They've heard about the challenges that women face and they want to improve that. But again, it's very hard to recognize the challenges that some people face when you are not those people, like when you don't have that shared experience or you don't have many women to talk to. So I think that, a lot of the men in the industry are in their bubbles of their realities, and their realities are not my reality. But they can't see my reality because their experiences are different. They don't face the same microaggressions that I do. They don't see them. They just don't pick up on them at all. And that's something that, I would pick up on. So, yes, they might think, oh, like my culture and my team is super inviting to women, whatever it is. But they're not realizing the microaggressions that they do, or they're not realizing the doors that they shut, or they're not realizing the space that they're not inviting, women to come into. And this is tough because this kind of goes back to telling men that they need to talk to women and specifically talk about these things. You have to talk to women to hear about their experiences and learn about their experiences so you can see them yourself. Because Men aren't going to face the gender microaggressions that women do. Men probably will not notice the board presentation that has, pictures of only professional men's teams, but women might. And these are all things that, of course, can change, right? Like, you're not going to have the same perspective your entire life. And I think that once people realize, the situation, or are taught to pick up on certain cues, they'll notice them. So this isn't written in stone. But I think that just saying, oh, yes, like, I care about, making cycling inclusive for women, isn't, that's nothing. Like, I don't care what you say. It's a lot about what you do. And that can be frustrating because, I do try to push a lot of the men that I know to get involved and to reach out to me or reach out to anyone, and try to make a difference. But that takes effort, right? That takes commitment. That takes a level of wanting to make a difference for something that does not affect their lives specifically. And I don't see a lot of men taking me up on those offers. Like, they're like, yeah, like, I totally want to improve your experience or improve the experience of women in my community. And then I'm like, cool, why don't you talk to me about our experiences? And then they don't want to reach out, or they just kind of go silent. And I think I've learned to just, you know, not accept it, but just know that it's going to be a process of me constantly bringing it up and talking to all the people I know about it until they start to internalize it.
Are you hopeful? What keeps you going?
I am hopeful. I think what keeps me going is that I see the changes affecting women around me in positive ways, both from what I can do and what other people can do. So, even if the change is so small, even if it's just, getting women to have the same prize payouts that men do, that impacts a lot of the girls that I race with or, help coach, who see that and like they see that, hey, like, I'm equal, I'm worth it. So it's small, right? Like, there's so many small victories that you can see and you can pick up on, and that keeps me going, because I think that even if it's just one person who you improve their life in cycling, that's enough, right? Hopefully it's more than one person, but that's where you start, and you just have to keep going each day and being willing to stand up and be annoying and take up space and frustrate some people and see what you can get done.
What are your aspirations in the industry?
Um, I think that my aspirations in the industry are, beyond just like racing success or, job success, and are definitely more of, I want to make cycling something that girls and women see themselves doing or have the space to take part in, and don't face the same hurdles or challenges that I face, or at least, we can decrease those hurdles. I think there are a lot of glass ceilings in cycling, both in industry and in the sport. I do want to make a difference there, and like, be able to, let's say when I retire from all of this, being loud and annoying and, racing bikes, I can look back and say, hey, like, I did that, I improved this person's life, I changed this, this rule to allow more women to get into things, and hopefully encourage more women to continue on the torch of taking up space and challenging what they see as not being fair or not being inclusive.
Have you had smooth sailing in terms of, I mean, what barriers have you seen for yourself?
Um, I think I've faced barriers of kind of access. It can be very hard to race at a high level when you don't have sponsors, or you don't have certain connections that other people do. In road racing, I've faced barriers where, the pro races didn't race for the same time period as the men's. That, we got cut short on time. We didn't have the same payout and prizes. some of those things I've I've worked to change. And some of those things, I see as a such a kind of endemic problem that, I see that the impact I can have is, helping people climb over those hurdles, right? Like if you can't knock the hurdle down, make it easier for other people to get over it, So if I can help someone figure out how to get to a race or how to get a license, like that took me forever to figure out, I'll pass that information on. I've faced, issues of sexism and discrimination, but I see that more of a common problem. Like that's what everyone faces. So I think most women have to have no choice but to overcome that themselves. I really just want to help other people not get knocked off course by what comes their way.
That's a great phrase, knocked off course, because that's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it just feels like, everyone's against you and like there's no hope and you're like, why am I doing this? I hate it. Everyone else hates me. Like, what's the point? And then, you get a text from someone who's like, hey, like I super appreciate, XYZ that you did for me. And you're like, it's worth it. It can be so lonely to be a woman in cycling. And I think recognizing that and then doing what you can to help other people not feel that same loneliness, keep them in the sport, keep them making changes, keep them making a difference is super powerful.
I wonder about sponsorship of athletes, and you sort of mentioned that, or you said something that made me think that maybe it was harder for women to get sponsorship. What's your impression of that?
Yeah, I think that's tough. I don't have much experience with sponsorship myself. In some ways, I see that nowadays, unless you're, a pro level cyclist, racing world tour, a lot of sponsorships are driven by social media,
Mm.
which is fine. But what I do see, and I have done like some little projects on, is that men who have sponsorships through social media often sell their bikes or like their racing or they can just rely on their videos or their experience to get views, and women are often turned into objects. So you see a lot more, you know selfies or heavy makeup shots or swimsuit photos. And this one's tough for me because absolutely women should do what they need to do to have success. They should feel perfectly willing to, post those photos on Instagram. But I think that it's, you know, can be misleading for young girls and boys to see that men can get sponsorship success by racing well and by posting cool bike videos, and women can get sponsorship success by looking pretty and showing off their colorful nails. And I wish the two weren't mutually exclusive. I wish that we had more instances of women influencers, let's say in cycling, who weren't just a pretty face, that were able to show off their videos or their skills more than most of them do. But again, this is a super tough balance because, I think that women should be able to feel pretty and they should be able to post whatever they want to post without being objectified. But it's such a tough balance. And I don't know the answer here, but I really would struggle to tell a teenage girl what they would have to do to get so many followers on social media and, get sponsorships that way. Because I think that many of the people we do see are selling themselves as an object more than they're selling their skills and their brain and their intellect and their discipline and, everything else that makes someone successful.
I've been thinking a lot about this, and I'm wondering, like, who the followers are. I mean, are they in fact women? And the reason I wonder about that is because the athlete that you're talking about is not an athlete that I would particularly follow. And so I'm just wondering if, yeah, I'm just wondering who their followers are. And are we just making it so that Instagram followers of male athletes are male and Instagram followers of female influencer model kind of athletes are also male?
Yeah, that's interesting, which I've thought about, kind of in the back of my head. I have a hunch. I have a hunch. I think you have a hunch too, that we are making it so that men are following the top men and the top women. And, we're expecting women to look pretty for that. And I'm not sure how to change that, right? Because like if the world of cycling, let's say, is 70% guys, and 30% women, you have, like, if you want to appeal to the largest fan base, you want to get those followers. So if men, if men are more receptive, I feel such a terrible person saying this. If, like, men in general might be more receptive to, a woman who looks super pretty for a photo versus a woman who is just showing off, a bike photo. Who am I to judge that woman for doing that to, like, getting those sponsorships? But then I see the young girls that I know who are trying to find someone to look up to and are seeing that, and it's so frustrating for me because it's so much more than what you look like. It's so much more than how you talk. It's so much more than sponsorships. It's everything else that we've spent the last hour talking about to find success. And I just don't know. It's so complicated now. And it's such a dynamic landscape.
I do wonder, though, if, those athletes, I mean, now it's hypothetical. I'm not thinking about anybody in particular, but, that hypothetical influencer female athlete, I mean, since I'm not going to follow her, I'm sure that other, people who are interested in following female athletes are also not following her. So, yes, more power to her to find followers, but at the same time, maybe people like me are missing out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people like your high school students are missing out.
Yeah. We need to make all of us the majority. And
Right.
then
Yes.
that's what I'm working on. I'm working on it.
Yep.
I'm working
Yep.
on it.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super tough.
Well, you make me want to start sort of spreading the word about female athletes who do a good job on social media.
Oh, good. Good. Yes. We should do that. I mean, there are so many, right? Like, there's a lot
Oh,
of really awesome
yeah.
women who might not be, like, have the highest followers, but are making such a difference in their communities at the grassroots level, or are just super cool people, right? Might be a rocket scientist, like, for their job and also race bikes. I want all the kids I work with to see that. It's like you can do so many things in your life. Like, it's not about how you look, it's about everything else that you are.
Well, all right. We have talked for way longer than I expected, and it has been absolutely fantastic. So thank you.
Of course, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for your time.
And that is a wrap for this week's show. Thank you to Noel for connecting me to Helena and recognizing that she and I would have a lot of stuff to talk about. It's always fun to have such terrific women on the show and to offer you an opportunity to learn from them and take those things into your own training and lives. There are other ways to keep the conversation going. Hear Her Sports is on social with the handle Hear Her Sports. You can send me an email to elizabeth@hearhersports.com. I always love hearing from you and do reply. And if you aren't a newsletter subscriber, check it out. Between episodes, I write a few words about issues in sports, the podcast, and how to watch women's sports or follow along in other ways. Sign up at hearhersports.com. And until next time, bye-bye.
That was sweet.
Hey there, and welcome to the Joy of Paddle podcast, hosted by me, Minter Dial, a veteran of the paddle tennis world, and sponsored by Paddle 1969. Whether you're a paddle tennis aficionado, just beginning, or have never even heard of paddle, or padel, as it's called in North America, this is an exhilarating new show that delves into the captivating stories of notable paddle personalities worldwide. In its inaugural season, you'll be treated to exclusive anecdotes, valuable tips, life lessons, and humorous moments shared by esteemed professional paddle players, industry insiders, and passionate paddle enthusiasts. With each season aligning with the Pro Tour, you can anticipate 2 engaging episodes per month. The Joy of Paddle podcast is part of the Evergreen Podcast Network, where you can find other great shows in a number of categories, such as sports, health and wellness, true crime, and fiction. To find out more about Evergreen Podcasts, go to www.evergreenpodcast.com. Vamos!